We are starting a new series tonight. How many of you enjoyed Empty? How many of you felt like it was beneficial? Okay, awesome, good. Well, this week we're starting a new series, and it is the month of February. So we deal with sex, dating, relationships. So, ooh, yeah. You say ooh, but that's the majority of what you guys think about, right?
I really can't say that.
Okay, you really can't.
I can say
It's a bad idea. Okay, so we're starting this series, and it's called Emotions. And we're gonna look at yeah, there's poop. We're gonna look at how emotions affect relationships and how relationships are affected by your emotions. So there's kind of like a play where every relationship involves emotions, right? And your emotional state affects every relationship. Do y'all agree with that?
True.
You know, you've had a bad day and kind of taking a couple steps back sometimes in relationships. Okay, and guys, many of you know there are more relationships than just dating relationships, contrary to what middle school is all about. I'm just kidding. What? Okay, anyway. So, we're going to start out by looking at friendship. And, okay, I know for a fact that in your life, your parents or guardians is the most important relationship. Period. They have you the longest. They have the most influence, good or bad. They have the ability to shape you more than anyone else in your life. But where you are now, the most influential relationships are not your parents. And they're not your pastors. They're not your teachers. They're not your coaches. For the most part, it's media and your friends. Guys, I want you to know that according to studies, celebrities in the media are more influential at your age than your parents. So Miley Cyrus, Justin Bieber, they have more influence on you than your parents. How does that make you feel? Okay, yeah, the name changes, but, huh? Okay, I agree with that. Okay, anyway, okay, my examples are kind of dated because I don't listen to popular music that often. Okay, but we live in a world where we're influenced by social media. We're influenced by other people's opinions. We're influenced by so many things every day. And what we want to do is try to begin to sort through those things. And over the last couple years, we've talked about this concept in friendship of having two circles of friends. An inner circle and an outer circle. And both of them are important and significant. You need both. But your life, the quality and the direction of your life will be heavily determined by who you spend time with. I want you guys to know that. If you hang out with a group of people that's a certain way, it's going to be very difficult for you to be different than them. And it's funny because if you step back and look, people group into groups of friends that are very similar to them, right? So if they feel kind of insecure and like black sheep of the family, they find other black sheep to hang out with. If they're athletic and successful, they find other people who are athletic and successful. And you can look inside your school and see some of these groups of people. And those are extremes, but we all gravitate to people who we're similar to, who we feel safe and comfortable around, right? That's logical, right? Okay, so maybe that is not the best way to determine friends. Maybe who's around you, who struggles with the same things as you, who sees themselves the same way as you, maybe they're not the best friend option for you. And guys, this inner circle and outer circle, let me explain that a little bit more. And we'll move on. This is kind of just introductory background information, because we've talked about it before, but a lot of you are new and haven't been here since we've talked about it. So, the outer circle of friends is people who you're not going to share your secrets with. You're not going to confide in them about a major decision. But you'll spend time with them, you'll hang out with them, you enjoy their company. They may benefit you in some ways, but this is a person that's not a best friend. They're not a person that you're going to trust, ask for advice, anything like that. The inner circle is people who you trust. People who you go to for significant things, deep things. If you have a crisis, they're the one you think about going to first. And they're the one who gives you solid advice, and you feel comfortable going to them. Do y'all have those people, or are people popping into your mind?
Chandler.
Okay, a lot of times, we get our circles mixed up. A lot of times we go to people who should be in our outer circle for inner circle things. Okay, if there's a person who gets into trouble all the time, who does things that you think, gosh, they're really stupid, who, kind of doesn't, dang, guys, look at me so no one is offended. Okay, okay, if you have people that you think make stupid decisions all the time, and you go to them for advice, expect stupid advice, okay? It's as simple as that. Okay, listen. And you need to be careful about this, because here's where it gets kind of significant. You can let your inner circle influence you because you trust them, because you know they care about you deeply, because you know that they want what's best for you. You can hang out with outer circle friends, but don't let them influence. You be the influencer in that. The Bible tells us that the companion of a fool suffers harm. If you continually hang out with fools, it doesn't say you'll become a fool. It says you will suffer harm. It doesn't say you might suffer harm. It doesn't say bad things might happen to you. It says you will suffer harm. So, if you're hanging out with fools, bad things are going to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are a fool. It means their bad decisions are going to get you in trouble. Okay? So what determines a fool? Anybody?
How they act.
How they act? Decision making? Lack of wisdom? Huh?
Lack of law.
Ignorance, character, lack of logic, impulsive. Yes, those are all good things of fools. And stop looking around the room at people. Okay. So I talked about this a few years ago, and then we went to youth camp, and one of my leaders in the group had this guy that they were good friends before, and he always got him into trouble. And he was like, "What happens if the fool won't go away from me?" I said, "You be the leader. You make the decisions. You don't follow a fool. You lead the fool." If that makes sense. It's all a matter of who's making the decisions. Because if you go and allow somebody who's making poor decisions to make decisions for you, they're not automatically going to make good decisions for you. Okay, does that make sense? And guys, I think this inner circle, outer circle thing is really significant. I think it's very important. And I think that there are two types of people you need in your inner circle. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about two types of friends that you absolutely need. And we're going to use examples from the Bible. The first one is a man named Barnabas. Barnabas, right? That's a good name, right? You need a friend named Barnabas.
Always.
Okay, so why? Does anybody know anything about Barnabas?
No. His name
No?
is Barnabas.
Okay, his name is Barnabas.
Starts with a B.
Okay.
He's purple.
That's Barney.
Oh man.
Okay, so let's first start off by what Barnabas means. Does anybody know what Barnabas means? Other than the people I told today. No, you don't want a fool as a friend.
Aw, purple dragon.
Okay, I'll go ahead and tell you. Here it is. Acts 4, 36 and 37. This is our first introduction to the man named Barnabas. And his real name is Joseph. So it says, Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. So this man was nicknamed for being an encourager. He was nicknamed for his encouragement. Let's look at a couple other examples of how this guy kind of supported the disciples, the apostles, and everything else. So, shut up. So in Acts 9, most of the stories about Barnabas happen in Acts when the church is really beginning and starting up. And how many of you, we talked about Paul last week a little bit, right? Does anybody remember that? Or Saul? You know, the guy who killed Christians? The guy who stood and watched as the first martyr was killed. His name was Stephen. Charlie actually talked about Stephen, I think Sunday or last Sunday. I can't remember which. I think it was too, but I have trouble sometimes. Yes?
What's a martyr?
A martyr is someone who dies for their faith. So he was killed specifically because he was a Christian. And Paul, formerly Saul, was a man who was encouraged and empowered by the Jewish religious leaders to go out and hunt these people down and kill them. So what he wanted to do was kill the apostles. And then he had an experience where he was blinded on a road going to Damascus. He was blinded. And he heard Jesus talk to him and he said, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And Saul's like, I don't know who you are. You're just a voice. And he said, I'm Jesus, who you've persecuted. And so through this, Saul is converted to Paul. And Paul begins to believe in this God, this Jesus, that he was persecuting people for believing. Okay? So, if you're a believer in Jesus, and this guy who originally came around and tried to kill people like you is now one of you, how are you going to feel about welcoming him in?
English, please.
All right, so 10-foot rule for you. Anybody else? Okay, so here's how the disciples responded. When he, talking about Paul, came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. Okay, so naturally how we would. Skeptical. I'm not sure if this is just a trick to get close to us so he can kill us. We're not really okay with that. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. So Barnabas was the guy who gave Saul a chance. Barnabas was the guy who first saw maybe there is change in him. And Paul went and spent like over a year with Barnabas. And they just talked about God and built this relationship. And Barnabas is the one that bridged the gap to the other apostles and disciples of Jesus. So he's the one that used his credibility to bring this murderer into the fold. And if we know anything about the future, this murderer becomes one of the greatest teachers in the early church. He wrote more than half of our New Testament. So, what if Barnabas didn't take the chance on him? What if Barnabas just saw all the flaws and didn't give Paul a chance to prove that he changed, like the rest of the disciples wanted to? What would have happened? What would be different now? And then there's another instance. Okay, so Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So when everybody else saw the negative, Barnabas saw the positive. And then later on, we see another example of this. So this is also in Acts 15. It says, sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they are doing. So Barnabas and Paul were kind of tag teams of the first missionaries. The church sent them out and they went to different places and started churches. So Paul's like, let's go back and see how all these churches we started are doing. And Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with him, but Paul did not think it wise to take him, because he had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. So they get to this place where they want to go take another trip. And Barnabas wants to take John Mark, who's also his cousin, I think. And Paul's like, no, that got bailed on us last time. He had to run home to mommy, and he was no good to us. I don't want to take him. I don't want to trust him. So we see Paul has already become kind of skeptical of people like the rest of the apostles' disciples were about him. So we see in this situation now, Paul is the guy who's like, I don't know about him. I don't know if we can trust him. And Barnabas sticks up for that person again. And Barnabas, they had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. So what happens here is the missionary journeys, they split and they double influence, because Paul goes one way and Barnabas goes another. And Barnabas believes in people. You guys need someone in your inner circle who believes in you, who encourages you. When you can't see the good in yourself, you need somebody that can say, yeah, there's absolutely good there. You need that person to encourage you when you do well and when you screw up. You need someone who encourages you in your life, okay? The other person you need is a Nathan. Does anybody who Does anybody know who Nathan is in the Bible? Not your dad. Nope. We don't want him as a friend. Just kidding. Okay. Does anybody know what Nathan did? Nathan was a prophet, and he kind of supported David when he was king. And support is kind of loose. So just to set this passage up, and guys, this is going to be more practical and informational. I'm using these as examples, but this is significant. And I want you guys to see the importance in this. And in 2 Samuel 12, this is after David has committed adultery with Bathsheba. And yes, she was a girl. Okay, so to make matters worse, she says, I'm pregnant. And he's like, your husband's not going to like that. Her husband was at war, so there was no, hey, it's yours kind of thing. So what David does is brings Uriah home, who was her husband. He brings him home and tries to get him to sleep with his wife so that he can get away with it, right? So no one finds out about this. They think Uriah's the dad, obviously, and yay. But Uriah was a really good man. And he couldn't stand the thought of being at home with his wife while his fellow soldiers were still out in the field fighting and everything. So he slept under the gates of the city rather than going home to his wife. So David's like, this really isn't working. I'm going to get him drunk, and then he's going to go home and hang out with his wife and play board games and stuff like married couples do. So he tries to do that, and still Uriah refuses to go home. So what David does is he sends him back, and he tells the general, put Uriah where the fighting is the worst, where it's the most intense, and then tell everybody else to back up. Basically, he's saying, murder him. Leave him out to be killed so that I can get away with my sin. And let's see what Nathan says to David. So it says, the Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, there were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now remember, David was a shepherd. So he's speaking in a language that David knows and understands. Because obviously David would love and care for his sheep. So then he says, now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who would come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for the lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity." Then Nathan said to David, "You are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah. And if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you. And he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel." Then David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan replied, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die. But because you doing this, you have shown utter contempt for the Lord. The son born to you will die." So, yeah, it sucks. But think about this. Think about the guts that Nathan had. Because let's look at this realistically. David had already killed one person to cover this secret up. So he was willing to go to extreme measures to cover this thing up. And this guy called out the king. He called out a person that could have him killed, thrown out of the city. You know, he could have done anything. And this man called out his moral failures. Do you have anybody in your life that's willing to do that? Do you have anybody in your life that if you're in a relationship that's damaging, that's toxic, they'll tell you, regardless of whether you want to hear it or not? Do you have that person who, if you screw up, is going to say, "I love you, but this was really dumb"? Do you guys have that person? Do you guys have that person that cares more about you than how you feel about them? I hope so. Guys, so these are 2 relationships that I think are huge. The encourager and the accountability. And you need to have both of those people in your inner circle. You need to have both of those people in your life in a way that you listen to them. Now, depending on your personality, it's kind of funny that this happened this week because we kind of talked about a lot of this in our staff meeting. And it's funny how that seems to work. Depending on your personality, that will determine how much time you spend with each one of these people. I'm a person who is not very good at encouragement. I'm not. When something happens at the church, I look at what went right, what went wrong, what could we do better. And I don't spend much time on the what went right because we got that, right? So I focus on what we did wrong and what we could do better. And sometimes that leads to me not noticing what other people do and encouraging them for it. So because I beat myself up so much for the negative, I'm my own worst critic, so I need to spend time with people who are encouraging. I need to spend time with people who build me up. I need to make an effort to spend time with those people who speak encouragement into my life, who see the good when I only see the bad. Now, if you're one of those people who thinks you're pretty awesome and thinks you do no wrong and thinks that everybody else is dumb and you've got it all together, maybe you need that person that sees your blind spots. Maybe you need that person who sees, you think this, but this is how it comes across to people. You think you're right here, but have you ever considered what they think about you? And you might need that person that kind of brings you back down to reality a little bit. So that depends on where you are on that spectrum. Most people aren't at one extreme or the other. They're somewhere in between. But you absolutely need those people in your life that both encourage you, build you up, and those people that are willing to call you out even if it makes you a little uncomfortable.